Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And this week we're going to be taking a closer look at a new purchase of mine, a guitar purchase which may or may not have been inspired by Tom Bukovac's homeschooling videos. I'll link those down below if you haven't checked them out, please do. My 1995 Orville by Gibson Sunburst 335. So what exactly is an Orville by Gibson? Now before we delve into that too heavily, it's worth giving you historical context, hopefully give you a better understanding of why these guitars were ever made. Now rewind to the mid-1970s and we find ourselves in pretty dark days for Gibson. In 1969, Gibson's parent company, Chicago Musical Instruments, were acquired by the conglomerate ECL. Now fast forward to 1974 and Gibson finally becomes a subsidiary of Norlin, kickstarting what is known as the Norlin era for Gibson, an era associated with a nosedive in quality, primarily through cost-cutting methods implemented by the new management. For example, the one-piece mahogany necks of old were replaced by three-piece maple necks, and the one-piece mahogany body and one-piece maple top were replaced by multiple pieces of mahogany for the body and multiple pieces of maple for the top. This was also an era which gave birth to the infamous pancake bodies. In essence, this gave Gibson a chance to use cheaper pieces of mahogany, thinner pieces of mahogany with a maple layer in between, and again, multiple pieces of maple on top. No doubt there were good guitars made in this period, but the lasting legacy of the Norlin era is cost-cutting methods, detrimental to the quality of the guitars, and ineffective quality control. Unsurprisingly, it was around this time that high-quality copies of Gibson guitars started emerging from Japan. Now, Gibsons were kind of notoriously hard to get hold of in Japan, primarily because of the exchange rate. So from the early 1970s onwards, Greco were actually producing what are now thought of as lower quality and not particularly accurate Les Paul replicas from the Fujigen factory. However, this all changed in 1978 when Tokai got hold of an original 59 burst as well as some Gibson blueprints and recreated near enough exactly a 59 burst. This kind of increase in detail consciousness gave birth then to the Super Real series from Greco, which again took off and are thought to be some of the best kind of Gibson-style guitars that were made since the 1950s. Needless to say, these were a huge success and slowly but surely started appearing in the hands of Western musicians who were frustrated with the quality of the American-made counterparts at the time. Fender saw this. Fender actually were experiencing a difficult period themselves with the CBS buyback and decided to open their own Japanese division, Fender Japan. Now, this was immensely successful and gave birth to some incredibly rare and collectible Fender Japan guitars, primarily the JV Fenders and Squires, which at the time and still today are thought to be some of the best made Fenders since pre-CBS times. Inspired by Fender's success, Gibson chose to follow suit in 1988 and licensed the Fujigen factory to start making Orville and Orville by Gibson guitars. Now, interestingly, these guitars probably would have been branded as Gibson, as the Fender Japanese counterparts were, had it not been for the fact that the Japanese company had already trademarked the Gibson name in Japan. So Gibson went with Orville. Orville, if you're not aware, was the first name of Gibson's founding father, Orville Gibson. Now, for reference, it's worth pointing out at this particular point in time, Gibson Les Pauls made in the USA were constructed with short neck tenons and 9 large holes actually drilled in the body to try and relieve the guitars of some of the excess weight that had plagued Gibson for several years. They were also fitted as standard with 300k pots, meaning guitars from this era are notoriously dark sounding, a million miles away from the lightweight, very resonant, very kind of Telecaster-esque Gibsons of the 1950s. By comparison, Orville guitars were constructed using solid bodies and 500k pots, albeit with polyurethane finishes sometimes, and Japanese electronics and pickups. By contrast, it was the Orville by Gibson range, the top of the line range, which have actually gone on to become fairly collectible. These were constructed using the premium woods available to luthiers, also had nitro finishes, US hardware and pickups and electronics. You had 50 spec neck profiles, and crucially, you also had the long neck tenons, not really something that Gibson had done since since those sought-after 1950s guitars. Now, Orville guitars were produced between 1988 and 1998, whereas Orville by Gibson, by comparison, actually finished in 1995, making my ES335 1995 quite a late model. So what's it like? Honestly, I can say hand on heart, I've been absolutely blown away by how good this guitar is. Everything about it is just beautifully made. And honestly, in regards to the specs and appointments, the closest you would get currently to this from Gibson's line would be the custom shop range, which would kind of straight away be setting you back in the region of £4,600. By comparison, this cost me £1,400 shipped from France. And as I said, I've been immensely impressed. I came very close to actually purchasing a mid-level Orville some years ago in Cardiff, but for whatever reason didn't buy it. Kind of okay with the idea of owning a guitar which says Orville on the headstock, which I guess, to be honest, is probably the biggest kind of obstacle for these guitars, is the fact that, at least not writ large, it doesn't say Gibson on the headstock. Now, in regard to specs of this guitar, as I said earlier, we've got the crucial long neck tenon. Whether that makes a difference or not, I'll let you guys decide. We've got clues on tuners. We've got 59 neck carve that feels really particularly nice. We've got the fret edge binding, a pair of 57 classic Gibson pickups with 500k pots, nitro finish, and US hardware. I've also added a longer 59 style guard just for the fun of it. So, is it a real Gibson? I mean, straight away we can rule out it being a copy or a replica, as we're coming out of Japan with increasing frequency during that era. Not only for the fact that it was licensed by Gibson, but this particular one actually has the Gibson name and logo on the headstock. So in regard to whether it's a real Gibson, I guess that probably comes down to how far you're willing to push the definition of the term. But it is worth bearing in mind that these guitars more than likely would have been branded as Gibson, solely as Gibson, if it hadn't been for the fact that the Japanese company had already taken the trademark name in Japan. Now, as I said, this guitar plays beautifully. The fretwork is outstanding. The intonation is bang on all over the neck. Actually really surprised by the sound of the 57 Classics as well. I've read some great reviews and some not great reviews of those pickups, so I was intrigued to see how they sound. They're a little bit darker than I would maybe ordinarily go for, so maybe experiment with changing them in time. But as I said, the quality of this guitar, I would say you're pretty much getting custom shop spec and custom shop build quality at, I mean, kind of less than the price of a kind of Gibson original, to be honest. It's absolutely blown me away, and I kind of wish there was something which I could kind of temper this review with, which was a little bit more negative. But to be honest, everything about this guitar has been outstandingly good so far. So I'm excited to see what kind of music it yields and where it takes me going forward. So as ever, I'm Chris Buck. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode of Friday Fretworks. Cheers guys, take care, see you soon.